Welcome. I'm Kelsey Atwood, Tour and Public Program Manager, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the headquarters of the Society of the Cincinnati and its American Revolution Institute here at Anderson House. The Institute promotes knowledge and appreciation of the achievement of American independence by supporting advanced study, presenting exhibitions and public programs, advocating preservation, and providing resources to teachers and students. Today's program celebrates the 2nd of July, the date in 1776 when the Continental Congress approved a resolution declaring that these United Colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, the dramatic act that formally created the independent United States of America. 2 days later, on July 4th, the day we're used to celebrating Independence Day, Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. John Adams wrote of this day, "The 2nd day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epocha in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shoes, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other from this time forward forevermore." This year, we are celebrating the 2nd of July with the music from the era of the War of 1812. Our performers are David and Ginger Hildebrand, and they are experts in researching, recording, and performing early American music. Since 1980, they have presented concerts and educational programs throughout the country for museums, public schools, and universities. They've provided soundtrack materials and served as period music consultants for PBS and C-SPAN, including on the documentary Anthem, marking the bicentennial of the Star-Spangled Banner. Ginger holds a Master of Music degree in guitar performance from the Peabody Conservatory. David earned a Master of Arts degree in musicology from the George Washington University and a PhD from the Catholic University of America. They founded the Colonial Music Institute in 1999. They are here today to share with us music from the War of 1812 and to teach us about what we can learn from these musical pieces about the culture at that time. Please join me in welcoming David and Ginger Hildebrand.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. David and I are thrilled to be back in costume, singing and playing our nation's history, especially after having emerged just recently from yet another historic era.
The War of 1812. People wonder, how could we possibly have gotten back into war with Great Britain less than 50 years after the Revolution? Our first song will explain it. Sailors' rights and free trade. We were unable to protect our shipping, and the British Navy freely attacked, in some cases boarded, shanghaied American sailors into the British Navy against their will. It was an untenable situation. Thomas Jefferson, who coincidentally had sort of decommissioned much of the Navy built up under John Adams, Thomas Jefferson decided the best way to stop the Brits from doing this was economically, in putting into place a trade embargo in 1805. It was a horrible mistake. It completely backfired, and this song outlines how Americans felt about the economy suddenly being stopped by a presidential embargo upon trade with Great Britain. The embargo. Dear sirs, it is wrong to demand a new song. I have let all the breath I can spare go. With the muse I've conferred, but she won't say a word. Keeps laughing about the embargo. Our great politicians, those dealers in visions, on paper to all lengths they dare go. But when called to decide, like a turtle they hide in their own pretty shell, the embargo. In the time that we try to put out Britain's eye, I fear we shall let our own pair go. Yet still we're so wise if we see with French eyes, and then we should like the embargo. For a French privateer can have nothing to fear, She may load and shade here and they there go. Their friendship is such, we love them so much, we let them slip through the embargo. Our ships all in motion once whitened the ocean. They sailed and returned with the cargo. Now doomed to decay, they have fallen a prey to Jefferson, worms, and embargo. Lest Britain should take a few men by mistake, who under false colors may dare go. We're manning their fleet with our tars who retreat from poverty, sloth, and embargo. What a fuss we have made about rights and free trade. Swore we'd not let our own share go. Now we can't for our souls bring a hake from the shoals. That's a breach of the 20th embargo. And our farmers so gay, how they galloped away. 'Twas money that made the old mare go. But now she won't stir for the whip or the spur. There's nothing we hate like embargo. Thus Tommy destroys a part of our joys, yet we're not let the beautiful fair go. They all will contrive to keep commerce alive. There's nothing they hate like embargo.
This instrument is called today a hammered dulcimer. In early America, it was called simply dulcimer, but it takes its history all the way back to the 12th century. So it has had many other names, including hochbrett, santur, salterio, psaltery, zither. And it's been popular in many, many places across the globe. Because of its struck strings, it's a hammered stringed instrument as opposed to the bowed instruments and the plucked stringed instruments. It puts itself in a different class of stringed instrument along with one other instrument, the piano.
The embargo was indeed repealed, and people celebrated musically, composing, among other songs, one entitled "The Death of the Embargo." But things did not get better. In fact, they got quite worse. And by the time James Madison became president, he was convinced by certain senators to agree to declare war against Great Britain in June of 1812. Things went very poorly at the outset as we Americans attempted to invade Canada. Not a good result out of that. However, at sea, things went better much sooner. And several of our songs today are about specific sea battles. We begin with one now between the United States, a frigate commanded by Stephen Decatur, coming up against the British Macedonian. And this is an adaptation of a song that was very popular back during the Revolution called Liberty Tree, but just with new words put to it about this sea battle under the title Decatur and the Navy. Let glory proclaim to the hills of the west the triumphs of freedom afar. Our song be Decatur and liberty blessed, huzzah for the brave and the war. The gallant commander and aid his brave band rejoice at the sight of the foe. 3 cheers give the signal, each heart and each hand conspires to strike the firm blow. Then furious the cannon's fierce thundering roar, death speedily follows the blaze. The dead and the dying were covered with gore, while freedom the contest surveys. Sweet goddess that guides us to glory and fame, and rides in the terrible blast. And now to Decatur, a glorious name, that long as his country shall last. The fierce Macedonian soon yields to her foe, she yields to the gallant and brave. Success to our sailors wherever they go, and in death sweet peace to their grave. Huzzah to the brave that triumphantly ride, and traverse the boisterous sea. Columbia's glory, her honor and pride, and freedom's fair bulwark shall be.
The tars of Columbia were born to be brave, their birthright is liberty blessed. To shield it from insult, from ruin to save, shall long be the pride of each breast. Then hail to our Navy, all hail in the bumper, Decatur, Jones, Porter, and Hull. May Roger soon meet with the fierce roving plumper, and drub his old friend Johnny Bull.
So this is what guitars looked like in early America. We call this guitar a Baroque guitar. They, of course, called it guitar, but sometimes Spanish guitar in early America. This guitar has 10 strings in 5 courses. In other words, it's played like a 5-string guitar, but they're 2, like a 12-string guitar in modern times. Guitars were always this fancy, and they were very, very expensive. So it was an instrument of only the upper class. It was not a popular instrument. Guitars became popular when they became less fancy. And so this is a more modern guitar from the later part of the 19th century. But this is the transition that was made then between 1780 and 1820, from the crazy fancy Baroque guitar to what's pretty much a modern guitar, and fancy to very, very plain. It led the way for the guitar to become a popular instrument, but it was not yet popular until at least the mid part of the 19th century.
We'll use the more modern. This actually is very old modern guitars. This was built around 1895. It's an American-made Washburn-style guitar. And we'll use it to accompany the music that would end up accompanying the president when he entered the room. But it's got a bit of a story behind it.
Our next tune is called The President's March. It was written for George Washington by a very unlikely fellow. Philip File was a Hessian, and he was brought to America by the English to help do us in during our Revolution. He was not a soldier, though. He was a musician, and so his job was to keep the Hessian officers happy in their tents while they were having dinner. And he did a particularly awesome job of this on December 25, 1776. Until George Washington and his men came from across the Delaware and joined the party, so to speak. Philip File was taken a prisoner of war that night. And for a musician, prisoner of war, you don't put that person behind bars because he's too valuable. So he found himself playing then for American officers during dinner in their tents, keeping them happy. This was within weeks. He wrote this piece of music, though, after the war. He became an American citizen, stayed here, and wrote this song for George Washington. Called it The President's March. I hope you recognize this piece because a generation later, words were composed to this melody. And Hail Columbia was the ensuing song. It became pretty much the most important patriotic song throughout the 19th century.
And we'll follow The President's March with a nice, sprightly country dance tune, just to clear the air a little bit after the formal march. It's called Sweet Richard. James Madison, by the War of 1812, was an elderly man. He was a short man. He was rather frail, not in the best health. And as the war ground on and people had more and more difficulty accepting the consequences of war, such as the burning of the White House and the Capitol by the British, people laid more and more blame at Madison's feet. Some brilliant songwriter thought, hey, you know, there's this old Scottish song called John Anderson, My Joe. My Joe is a term of endearment in Scottish song. And John Anderson, My Joe, James Madison. Well, John Anderson was about an elderly guy who was rather feeble. So I thought, let's put these two things together. We end up with a song called James Madison, My Joe that circulated actually in both positive and negative forms. I'll sing one of the negative ones here, outlining the reasons why people are so upset that America had gone to war. James Madison, My Joe. James Madison, my Joe, Jim, I wonder what you mean. You proclamate in chair of state a vision or a dream. The war you did begin, Jim, and why did you do so? You should have found some better ground, James Madison, my Joe. James Madison, my Joe, Jim, we find your plans have failed. Ere this you know that deadly woe and taxes you've entailed. Upon this happy land, Jim, you've brought disgrace also, that you can't cure nor we endure, James Madison, my Joe. James Madison, my Joe, Jim, 'twas when you first began. The world did say, and well might they, that you was not the man. You was a dupe of France, Jim, and Jefferson also. With a gunboat fleet you'd Britain's beat, James Madison, my Joe. Our capital you lost, Jim, much wealth with it likewise. Your fame is fled, your honors dead, your minions we despise. In wisdom you're deficient, Jim, and energy also. Most manfully you ran away, James Madison, my Joe. James Madison, my Joe, Jim, you've winged your flight with speed. With courage rare, you knew not where to drive your lank old steed. While British troops were feasting, Jim, on wine and ale you know, you weary fled to seek a bed, James Madison, my Joe. Well, I fain would here advise you, Jim, where you must next retreat. In Carter's Mount there is a fount at Thomas's country seat, where you may rest secure, Jim, likewise your friend Monroe, free from all harms and war's alarms, James Madison, my Joe. Well, in Madison, my Joe, Jim, no longer we'll withhold. You bartered all at Bona's call, our liberties and gold. A patriot shall supplant you, Jim, and he shall rule in style, while you and Tom find asylum in Little Elba's Isle.
So we were talking about the instruments and the relative popularity of them. Actually, we haven't talked about the relative popularity yet, but we're going there. Guitars were not popular, they were too expensive. Pianos had not met their heyday. They were far from it. Dulcimers were in very short supply. And we've done a lot of research into this. It seems to us that about 80% of the musical instruments in early America were violins, interchangeably called fiddles. They were cheap, they were easy to come by. Actually, Thomas Jefferson played a very, very nice Italian instrument, I'm sure that was not cheap. But his slaves played violins, and those I'm sure were cheap. So they were in great numbers, and a lot of people played them. But the gender relationship with violins is a little crazy. Women did not play violins, and I've heard people try to justify why that was the case. It is certainly not for any physical reason, I will tell you that from experience. But it just was not fashionable. A woman violinist, she would pretty much lose her reputation, certainly if she had any to start with. And so a woman would not become a violinist by choice. Fashion drives so much. And if I could talk just for a minute about fashion, specifically that it doesn't make a lot of sense. In the 18th century, a woman tried very hard to be as flat as she possibly could and as wide as she could. Wide so that she could show how much fabric she could afford. And flat, I'm not sure why. But when we think about how much fashion has changed and the degrees by which we try today not to be flat and not to be wide, it reminds me, at least, how little fashion makes sense. But it does drive so much of what we do. And it's that's the reason, I think, why women did not play the violin in early America. So I guess I will apologize for my gender. It's kind of what we do, and you don't want to hear it the other way around.
So now that we're breaking the gender rules, Ginger's going to play a very low-class song, accompany a piece called The Siege of Plattsburgh. The Battle of Plattsburgh occurred the day before the British began bombarding Baltimore in September of 1814. This is up on Lake Champlain. And it was rather a rout by the Americans of the Brits. Several important heroes emerged out of it. But what's curious about this next song, it's preserved on a broadsheet, a broadside. A broadside is a single sheet of paper with text only. It doesn't include musical notation. In some cases, it gives you advice as to sing this to the tune of something or other, or in other cases, it names the tune. Well, for this song, the tune named is Boyne Water, an Irish tune. So we'll start by accompanying it with an Irish bow drum. But the subtitle to The Siege of Tripoli is to be sung in the character of a black sailor. This is very unusual, except that it turns out that a full 1/6 of the American Navy was populated by men of African descent. Whites and blacks fought alongside. They covered for each other. There was a great deal of mutual respect. And so this narration, this story of the Siege of Plattsburgh is being told from the perspective of a black sailor to an Irish tune. And it's really a curious anomaly. It's given out, the text is given out, by the way, in dialect, which I won't follow. We'll follow the words in straight English. Here, The Siege of Plattsburgh. Backside Albany lies Lake Champlain, one little pond half full of water. Plattsburgh there, too close upon the main, town small but grew bigger hereafter. On Lake Champlain, Uncle Sam sent his boats, and Master McDonough sails them. while General Macomb makes Plattsburgh his home, with an army whose courage never failed him. On the 11th day of September in 1814, Governor Prevost with all his British men came to Plattsburgh, a tea party courtin'. And his boats came too after Uncle Sam's boats. McDonough looked sharp out the window, and General Macomb, he's always at home, caught fire just like a tinder. Bang, 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 the cannons start to roar in Plattsburgh and all around the quarter. And General Prevost tries his hand upon the shore, while his boats try their luck upon the water. But Master McDonough knocked his boat upon its head, broke his heart and broke his shin, stove his calf in. And General Macomb starts with Prevost heading home. To my soul, I must then die laughing. Prevost was scared, so he left all behind, powder ball, cannon, teapot, and kettle. Some say he caught a cold and troubles in his mind, 'cause he ate so much raw and cold victual. Uncle Sam, sorry to be sure for his pain, wish he made himself up well and hearty. For General Macomb and McDonough's coming home gave them a notion for another tea party. We switch now to a real African-style drum. This is a djembe. Djembe is a family of drums. They come in different sizes, long and short and small, but they always have the same general proportion. These were crafted from the very beginning of slavery in the colonies. These were crafted out of natural materials, reported in the hands of the enslaved, and became very popular instruments because they were so easy and cheap to make, to accompany the singing of a style of music that would become known as the spiritual. Now, Americans didn't really hear real spirituals until just after the Civil War, at least in published form. They weren't really disseminated widely until a book called Slave Songs of the United States was issued in 1867. And now when we switch to a more genuine African-inspired type of music, the musical elements will change. Instead of this syncopated Irish tune and a mode, we're going to have now an even more syncopated African call and response tune with what's called the blue scale. That is, certain notes of the scale are kind of smudgy. Those are the notes that a saxophone player will bend when playing jazz. Yada-da-da-dum, that sort of thing. This is an Africanism as opposed to an Irishism. So here's a spiritual collected in Virginia in the 1830s, likely sung as far back as the 18-teens, under the title, Don't Be Weary, Traveler.
Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus.
My head got wet with the midnight dew.
Come along home to Jesus.
Angels bear me witness to.
Come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus.
Where to go I did not know. Come along home to Jesus.
Come along home.
Ever since he freed my soul.
Come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus.
I looked at the world and the world looked new. Come along home to Jesus. I looked at the world and the world looked new. Come along home to Jesus.
Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus.
So most of the pieces that we've been, or the songs that we've been singing for you today have been parodies. These are newly composed lyrics written to existing melodies that everybody knew at the time. Parody was the way of American music for many reasons. The biggest reason, though, was economic. There were very few printing presses at the time that had musical type. So most of the printed music was actually imported from London at the time. And you could publish your new song in tomorrow's newspaper if you published it to an existing melody. And there were probably at least 40 melodies that you could guarantee everybody knew. So all you had to say at the top of the lyrics was to the tune of Derry Down or the tune of Yankee Doodle, and everybody knew what you meant.
God Save the King was frequently parodied as well. And of course, we here in the United States ended up absconding with that one by 1831, as My Country 'Tis of Thee. This song, as really almost everything in this program, is yet another parody under the title Yankee Tars. You may have noticed in the previous piece references to Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is an icon that shows up in the War of 1812, just kind of out of the blue. Nobody knows where he came from, but he becomes a part of American culture. Another thing that terminology-wise you need to know is that a tar is a sailor. The reason that sailors were called tars is that the rigging on these ships was tarred to protect it, and that black tar would rub off and get on the clothing of the sailors. And you could see it, and you could also very much smell it. So the term tar equals sailors. Yankee is a term that confuses us sometimes because in the Civil War we think of, well, rebels and Yankees, the Confederacy and the Union. Sure, that applies then. But if we go back to the Revolution, the British referred to us both as Yankees and rebels in the Revolution. In 1812, though, we had sort of taken on the term Yankee with pride. And that's why it shows up as the title of this song, boasting about various sea battles. Especially mentioned here in this one is that famous encounter in which the ship Constitution earned its name Old Ironsides when it defeated the Guerriere on open sea. So Yankee Tars to the tune of Derry Down. And if we were all here together in a space, as I wish we were at the moment, we would all be singing the chorus together. So imagine that as we proceed through Yankee Tars. When nature, kind goddess, first formed this big ball, in fanciful mood, good and ill she bestowed, assured that she never could satisfy all. She'd one favorite land with all blessings endowed, with the down, 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 Derry down. She called it Columbia and swore before Jove that the rest of the world for this country should toil. Through Asia and Africa and Europe her love sought for us choicest gifts from each clime and each soil, with the down, 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 Derry down. Our country she made the asylum of laws, the refuge of liberty, science, and arts, then a surety for truth and humanity's cause. She planted our bosoms with true Yankee hearts, with a down, 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 Derry down. She then with these words made the welcome to ring. You have now every blessing that I can bestow. 'Tis yours to preserve, and a navy's the thing that your rights shall protect from each insolent foe, with the down, 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 Derry down. See the cruisers of Britain with threatening air sweep the seas and defy us with thundering noise. The Guerriere, her name on her mainsail so fair, cries death and submission to all Yankee boys, with the down, 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 Derry down.
But bold Captain Hull and his bold Yankee tars proved her masts were all heartless and heartless her men, and the Guerriere soon bade a farewell to all wars. Justice triumphed and justice shall triumph again, with a down, 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 derry down. Next brave Captain Jones met the Frolic one day, in her masts too soon to weak, and too weak were her men. At least very soon masts and men shot away, proved that justice will triumph and triumph again, with a down, 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 derry down. The hero of Tripoli next met the foe, and 'tis still the same story told over again, of fighting they scarcely could make out a show, when their masts were all gone, killed or wounded their men, with a down, 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 derry down. 'Tis thus Yankee tars shall their country protect, and the rights of the seas on a sure basis place, the vauntings and threatenings of Britain be checked, and a navy and commerce our country shall grace, with a down, 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 derry down, with a down, 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 derry down.
We move now to a great lake with a dance on either side, either shore.
Fort Niagara, Quick Step, and Sackett's Harbor, two fiddle tunes written for military strongholds on Lake Ontario, the western shore and the eastern shore.
And the Fort Niagara one was actually written by an Army fiddler who was stationed there at Fort Niagara. John Carroll was his name. We learn it from his manuscript. The first book to include the words to the defense of Fort McHenry, which we later know as the Star-Spangled Banner, the first book to include those lyrics includes another song about the same event, a very different kind of a song. When Ginger was referring to parody, there's often a second level, a sort of a subliminal point to be made by the choice of the tune that you write your new words to. And so if you happen to choose, as with this next song entitled The Battle of Baltimore, if you choose Yankee Doodle, you're really about to make fun of somebody, because this was a hugely insulting song. It was crafted around the surrenders of, both Cornwallis and up at Saratoga. It was forbidden, actually, to be played as such a symbolic tune as Yankee Doodle. The Brits wouldn't let Americans play it when they retreated out of Savannah, for instance. So, or maybe that was Charleston. Anyway, this is a parody of Yankee Doodle called The Battle of Baltimore, and it's a low-class song. You know, Francis Scott Key was a gentleman, and he crafted his words carefully, and he chose a song you'll learn at the end of our program from a gentlemanly source. But this Yankee Doodle parody can do all the stuff that a low-class person can get away with that a gentleman can't. So for instance here in a verse, fun will be made of the British General Ross, who was killed when the British landed Marines to try to take Baltimore by land. It also has a cryptic reference back to Alexandria, not far from where we're filming right now, the city that had to surrender to the British for fear of being destroyed otherwise. One more thing before we do it. The chorus to this song is adapted a little bit. It becomes Yankee Doodle beat the drum, Yankee Doodle dandy, because the drum was the signal to bring the citizens of Baltimore to help defend the fort, to help defend the fortifications all around the city from land attack. Beat the drum, and if by day or night they come, that's when you'll find us handy. These were 24-hour routines here, the marching of the Marines, the firing upon the fort, and so forth. Battle of Baltimore.
Come all you brave Americans and join the song of glory, all ye that fought so brave of late and drove them on before ye. When Ross made his approach on land and Coburn on the water, they thought we'd play into their hand without attempt at slaughter. Yankee Doodle beat the drum, Yankee Doodle dandy. Night they day, night they come, they'll always come handy. When Coburn passed the fort below and Ross had passed the point, sir, he gave 3 cheers to let Ross know that he was not behind, sir. Now Coburn, if you come again to visit us at night, sir, don't cry hurrah before you know that you're exactly right, sir. Yankee Doodle beat the drum, Yankee Doodle dandy. If by day or night they come, they'll always find us handy. And Ross the same advice might take, but since with rum he's blind, sir, his army may depend that Smith is not like General Winder. We've powder plenty, grape shot too, so have we men to hand them. Of musket balls we have a few, we're sure you cannot stand them. Yankee Doodle beat the drum, Yankee Doodle dandy. If by day or night they come, they'll always find us handy. If their lordships will advance, our fear will be but little. We'll surely play a sailor's dance upon an iron fiddle. If Coburn, Cochrane, or Lord Hill again our town will visit, we hope our soldiers will have skill enough to make them miss it. Yankee Doodle beat the drum, Yankee Doodle dandy. If by day or night they come, they'll always find us handy. Then let's unite by sea and land, may victory crown our navy. And if like Ross they come, we'll stand and drive them to Old Davie. Therefore, ye brave Americans, join in this song of glory, and fight as ye have fought of late, and drive them on before ye. Yankee Doodle beat the drum, Yankee Doodle dandy. If by day or night they come, they'll always find us handy.
There's a lot of good American history to be learned through this program. We know now where Uncle Sam came from, for instance. We're also about to learn where the motto of the United States Navy came from. It came from the dying words of Commodore Lawrence aboard the ship, the American frigate ship entitled Chesapeake. Chesapeake had been lured out by the Brits off the coast of Massachusetts, saying, "Come fight me, take me on one by one. I know we can duke this out." And unfortunately, when Captain Lawrence uttered these words after he was wounded, "Don't give up the ship," they gave up the ship. But it became the rallying cry for the Navy. And not long after, Americans enjoyed a much greater victory way over on Lake Erie, when Oliver Hazard Perry secured the surrender of the entire Lake Fleet of the British up on Lake Erie. That very flag that Perry had made to fly honoring Lawrence in this other battle, it exists. It's down in storage. They have a replica up that you can see because it's too valuable, but it's down in Annapolis. So "Don't Give Up the Ship, Boys" is the title of our next piece. Another adaptation of a British tune, this one entitled "Jack at Greenwich." Jack is another name for a sailor. Jack Tar is kind of redundant if you call a sailor by both of those nicknames. The Ship Boys, to the tune of "Jack at Greenwich." Come, messmates, cheerily lead the night, and toast each absent beauty. Mayhap we'll bleed ere morning light. What then? What is our duty? On sea or shore, in peace or strife, whate'er the cause that breeds it, a tar knows how to give his life whene'er his country needs it. We've something too to give our foes. If they don't give us the slip, boys, we'll give them broadsides, blood, and blows. But don't give up the ship, boys. The ship, boys, the ship, boys. The ship, boys, the ship, boys. We'll give them broadsides, blood, and blows. But don't give up the ship, boys. When o'er Nantaskett's fatal wave our Lawrence sought the battle, and for a hero's crown or grave bade all his thunders rattle, says he, "My lads, you know the way that fighting foes give slaughter, and should our valor win the day, then give the vanquished quarter." But when capsized the words that last hung on his dying lip, boys, were "Let our flag still crown the mast, but don't give up the ship, boys." The ship, boys, the ship, boys. The ship, boys, the ship, boys, was "Let our flag still crown the mast, but don't give up the ship, boys." And to a Yankee seaman's creed, his heart he gives his fairest, his person is cheer to a brother's need, with songs and fiddles rarest. His hulk while in life's tide it lives, his country's arms must lade it, and when his cruise is up, he gives his soul to him who made it. But rough or bloody be the wave, and even in death's cold grip, boys, Columbia's tars, so staunch and brave, will ne'er give up the ship, boys. The ship, boys, the ship, boys. The ship, boys, the ship, boys. Columbia's tars, so staunch and brave, will ne'er give up the ship, boys.
Scottish music was very popular in early America until the Scottish bankers decided to call in their debts at the end of the Revolution, at which point the entire Scottish culture kind of lost favor. It was no longer a fashionable thing. Cue Irish culture. The music of Turlough O'Carolan, the blind Irish harp player, became very popular, as did The Poor Soldier, a brand new ballad opera composed in 1783 in London about Patrick, the poor soldier, who comes back to his native Ireland, goes to the home of his beloved Nora, and at the end of Act 1 finds a barber hiding in her closet and comes to the conclusion that she has been unfaithful to him these many years. The problem is that at the end of Act 1, that's the traditional place in the opera for the main love song of the entire work. And so we're all ready for the main love song, and they're about to sing their love about the rose tree, the metaphor of their union. But the rose tree has a canker in it. The rose tree.
A rose tree in full bearing had sweet flowers fair to see. One rose beyond comparing for beauty attracted me. A rose tree in full bearing had sweet flowers fair to see. One rose beyond comparing for beauty attracted me. Though eager then to win it, lovely blooming fresh and gay, I find a canker in it and now throw it far away. How fine this morning early, that sun shining clear and bright. So late I loved you dearly, but lost now each fond delight. The clouds seem big with showers, sunny beams no more are seen. Farewell, you fleeting hours, your falsehood has changed the scene. The clouds seem big with showers, sunny beams no more are seen. Farewell, you fleeting hours, your falsehood has changed the scene.
So Patrick and Nora are the upper class Irish lovers. There is a lower class set of lovers in this ballad opera, whose song we will sing next.
One of the ways you can tell that they're lower class people is making fun of the Irish nonsense chorus. The Derry Down song is a nonsense chorus with a down, 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 Derry down. It doesn't really mean anything. But the chorus on this one is a little goofy. It goes, do the rum doodle lagity, nagity tragedy tum, goosterum fool lidgity nidgity fidgety thumb, which is hard to say. It's easier to sing, it's hard to say. Though late I was plump, round and jolly.
And now I'm as thin as a rod. Oh, love is the cause of my folly, and soon I'll lie under the sod.
Though late I was plump, round and jolly, but now I'm as thin as a rod. Oh, love is the cause of my folly, and soon I'll lie under the sod. Do the rum doodle lagity nagity tragedy tum, and goose the rum foodle idgity nidgity fidgety fum. Dear Kathleen, then why did you slight me, a boy who's cozy and warm? I've everything fancy about me, a snug little cabin and farm. Do the rum doodle lagity nagity tragedy tum, and goose the rum foodle idgity nidgity fidgety fum. Although I don't have much money, no cocks in my chambers attend, on Sunday I'll ride on my pony and still have a bit for a friend. Do the rum doodle lagity nagity tragedy tum, and goose the rum foodle idgity nidgity fidgety fum. The cock courts his hens all around me, the sparrow, the pigeon, the dove. Oh gosh, how this courtship confounds me. I'll want for the girl that I love. Sing doodle-rum doodle, agity, nagity, tragedy, tum. Goose-da-dum, foodle, lidgety, nidgety, fidgety, fum.
I mentioned the music of Turlo O'Carolan, the blind Irish harp player. We have a tune of his next. It's called Morgan McGann, one of our favorites of his.
This next excellent parody takes the unofficial anthem of the British Army and turns it back at them, the way that it did during the Revolution. I'm speaking of a tune called The British Grenadiers that was written to honor the British Army right in 1759 on the heels of their successes in Canada against the French. So when you take your enemy's song, the most special song, and you turn it back at them, it's super effective. It worked in the Revolution to a text known as General Washington or War in Washington, which we believe is possibly the single most popular song of the American Revolution period. But in the War of 1812, people were aware that it was a revolutionary song because as these words appear in print, they are led by the title, An Old War Song of 76, New Vamped. So we're going to vamp our way through what's actually a combination of several of the Revolutionary period verses with a couple new ones from the 1812 period. And you'll also learn a new important term. Where did damned Yankees come from? It's possibly this song. That seat of science, Athens, and earth's great mistress Rome, where now are all their glories, we scarce can find their tomb. Then guard your rights, Americans, nor stoop to foreign sway, and thus immortalize the fame of free America. Our sires led freedom hither, where lo the desert smiled. A paradise of pleasure was opened in the wild. Your harvest free Americans no power shall snatch away. Huzzah, 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 huzzah for brave America. To quit a realm of tyrants, our fathers crossed the main, here formed a new dominion and founded freedom's flame. Britain's own master here fate urges on the day when Neptune's trident shall be swayed by a free America. degenerate sons of Britain, think not your threats we fear. We too have naval laurels and wield a martial spear. Such arrogant pretensions as ye elsewhere may display will ne'er appall the hardy sons of a free America. Though barbarous British blackguards with Coburn at their head may rob defenseless hen roosts and strike our geese with dread, yet when they meet damned Yankees armed, those miscreants sneak away and tremble to behold the stars of a North America. So we close our program by pulling together a number of threads over the past hour. The concept of parody, the song about Stephen Decatur. I've mentioned Francis Scott Key once already. But in order to get a quick version of where did our national anthem come from, we need to go to London in the 1760s, when a gentleman's club decided to be formed around a new name. They were tired of the sublime society of the beefsteaks or the Tuesday Club or something like that. And they decided to name themselves after the Greek poet-musician named Anacreon. The songs and poems of Anacreon had been rediscovered early in the 18th century, and it turns out they were quite licentious. They were about love and wine. And Anacreon and anacreontic, as an adjective, came into use in England especially. So this club, they decided, the president sat down, Mr. Tomlinson sat down and said, I'm going to write a poem about how in an imaginary way we were founded this club by Anacreon up in heaven, who would look down and give his blessings upon us using his name because of that love and wine stuff going on. So apparently they spoke the poem at club meetings for some time, and then someone got the great idea, let's have our poem set to music. So they brought in a man named John Stafford Smith to compose a melody around this poem. Now, here's where a parody doesn't work to start with, because the poem was written in very irregular structure. Funny numbers of lines, funny numbers of syllables per line, nothing matches it. But once the melody was written to this poem, it caught on, it was published. It was published in 1779, the year that Francis Scott Key was born. And that's really where all of this comes together here as we close with a little sampler of the original song called To Anacreon in Heaven, then an early American parody called Adams and Liberty, and then finally we'll close not with the Star-Spangled Banner, because you all know that, but with a verse written honoring Stephen Decatur, nearly a decade before the Star-Spangled Banner was written, a song by Francis Scott Key in 5 verses. Tremendous thanks go out to the Society for bringing us back for, what is this, year 14 perhaps? The support is gigantically appreciated, and it's such an honor to be here in this lovely space again, sharing music of American history. To Anacreon in heaven, where he sat in full glee, a few sons of harmony sent a petition that he their inspirer and patron should be. When this answer arrived from that jolly old Grecian, voice, fiddle, and flute, no longer be mute. I'll lend you my name and inspire you to boot. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. Ye sons of Columbia, who bravely have fought for those rights which unstained from your sires had descended, may you long taste the blessings your valor has brought, and your sons reap the soil which your fathers defended. Mid the reign of mild peace may your nation increase with the glory of Rome and the wisdom of Greece.
And there may the sons of Columbia be slaves, while the earth bears a planter, the sea rolls its waves. And there may the sons of Columbia be slaves, while the earth bears a planter, the sea rolls its waves. In a conflict resistless each toil was endured, till the foes fled dismayed from the war's desolation, and pale beamed their crescent, its splendor obscured by the light of the star-spangled flag of our nation, where each radiant star beamed a meteor of war, and the turbaned heads bowed to its terrible glare. Now mixed with the olive the laurel shall wave, and form a bright wreath for the brows of the brave. Now mixed with the olive the laurel shall wave, and form a bright wreath for the brows of the brave.
Play ball.
Thank you. Happy 2nd of July.